I remember the exact moment. It wasn't a warning. There was no flashing light, no dramatic music. It was a Tuesday. We were in a coffee shop, the low murmur of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine filling the space around us. He was a close friend, someone I'd trusted for years, someone I'd built a life with, piece by piece. We were talking about a new project, a passion of mine that he had claimed was his too. We were shaking hands on it, laughing. He was smiling, a wide, genuine smile that reached his eyes. And that's when it happened. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept through me. It was like watching a movie frame by frame, a second of pure, unadulterated clarity. I saw his smile, and in that instant I knew. I knew it wasn't a smile of shared victory. It was the smile of a predator, the smile of someone who was about to strike. That chill, that creeping dread, wasn't a feeling. It was an instinct. It was the primal part of my brain whispering a truth that my conscious mind couldn't yet accept. The person across from me was not my ally. He was my threat. I used to think betrayal was a big dramatic event, a backstab in a dark alley, a sudden cruel reveal. I thought it arrived with a warning. But that day, I learned a brutal, terrifying truth. Betrayal never arrives with a warning. It walks in with a smile. It shakes your hand. It agrees with your plans. And when the timing is perfect, when your guard is just low enough, it strikes. Most people don't get betrayed because they're weak. They get betrayed because they ignore the signs, the patterns, the subtle changes in behavior that only the strategic mind can detect. We want to believe in the fairy tale, don't we? That our friends are our friends forever. That loyalty is a bond that can't be broken. That love is enough to protect you. And the worst part is, we see the signs. Oh, we see them, but we rationalize them away. We tell ourselves we're paranoid. We remember the good times, the shared memories, the secrets we whispered to each other in the dark. We ignore the cold facts for the warm comfort of sentiment. But sentiment won't save you. It never has, and it never will. History is littered with the corpses of rulers, leaders, and even everyday people who trusted too easily, or worse, ignored the evidence out of sentiment. Because betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the people you let too close. It's the person who knows your secrets, who knows where you sleep, who knows your habits, who knows your weaknesses. Think about it. When has an enemy ever really caught you off guard? You're expecting it. You're on guard. But when has a friend ever betrayed you? It's always a shock, isn't it? It's always a punch to the gut. The answer is simple. The closer someone gets to you, the more they can hurt you. They have access to your most vulnerable spots, your deepest insecurities, your most private information. They are not a threat from a distance. They are a threat from within. That's why this video exists. It's not about paranoia. It's about pattern recognition. I'm not here to tell you to suspect everyone. I'm here to train you to identify slow betrayal. The kind that hides behind routine. The kind that becomes visible only when you're ruthless enough to look. We're going to get into the mind of Machiavelli, a man who didn't just study betrayal. He dissected it, named its anatomy, described the way it moves through power, like poison in wine, invisible until it's too late. He knew this better than anyone, and he believed that the greatest mistake a ruler or any person in power could make is to trust too easily or to ignore evidence. He saw it with his own eyes in the brutal politics of Renaissance Italy, and he laid out the signs, the exact strategies you need to sharpen your instincts. These aren't just theories. This isn't recycled pop psychology. These are actual signs based on how real betrayal happens in politics, alliances, friendships, and even families. 3 behavioral indicators that someone is not with you, even if they claim to be. The first sign, the one that blindsided me in that coffee shop, is what Machiavelli called shadow obedience. And I want to be very clear. This isn't a lesson in being a jerk. This is a lesson in self-preservation. It's about protecting what you've built, whether it's a company, a family, or your own sense of self. It's about taking off the rose-tinted glasses and seeing the world for what it is. A world where some people will always put their own self-interest first. A world where loyalty is not a given. It's something you must constantly test and reinforce. So, if you're ready to see the world with clear eyes, with the ruthless clarity of a master strategist, then let's begin. Let's learn to spot the smile that hides the dagger. Let's learn to understand the silent language of betrayal. Let's learn from the most ruthless teacher of all. Because the most dangerous betrayal is not the one you see coming. It's the one you excuse. That chilling feeling in the coffee shop, that gut-wrenching moment of clarity, wasn't born from nothing. It was the result of a slow, terrifying process that had been unfolding right under my nose. I just didn't have the tools to see it. For years, I had believed in a simple, almost childlike philosophy. If you're a good person, good things will happen to you. If you're loyal, people will be loyal back. I thought integrity was a shield. It's a comfortable delusion, isn't it? One that allows you to sleep at night, to build a world based on trust and shared values. But it's also a delusion that leaves you vulnerable. It leaves you exposed to the harsh reality of human nature. I've learned that the most important lessons are often the most painful ones, and my personal journey into the dark heart of power and Machiavelli began with a single, horrifying thought. Why did I let this happen? I'd always been a people person, an optimist. I saw the best in everyone. It was my strength, but it was also my greatest weakness. I was too busy looking for the good to notice the subtle rot. I was so focused on the shared vision that I was blind to the individual ambition. And that's where I realized my core mistake. The mistake that a man named Niccolo Machiavelli dissected 5 centuries ago. He didn't believe in relying on goodness or shared morality. He believed in systems. He believed in understanding human behavior for what it is, not for what we wish it were. My journey led me to the Prince and Discourses on Livy, not as academic texts, but as a survival guide. I was looking for answers, and Machiavelli's words hit me like a cold splash of water. He wasn't a villain. He was a realist. He saw the world without the rosy filters of sentimentality. He didn't say, "Trust no one." He said, "Be wary of those who give you no reason to be wary." He taught me that betrayal isn't personal. It's predictable. It's not about them hating you. It's about them loving themselves and their own interests more. And that, my friend, is a distinction that changes everything. It takes the emotional gut punch out of the equation and replaces it with a cold, hard logic. It's not a personal attack. It's a strategic move. And once you see it that way, you can fight it. The problem, as Machiavelli saw it, is that most people wait for the betrayal to become obvious, for the backstabbing, the stolen opportunity, the moment someone finally crosses the line. But he would say, if you wait until the betrayal is visible to act, you've already lost. The damage is done. The power is gone. The trust is shattered. And you're left picking up the pieces while the betrayer walks away with the prize. That's why his entire philosophy is based on proactive disloyalty detection. It's about spotting the subtle signals before they become a storm. It's about anticipating the move before the knight even leaves its square. It's about being 2 steps ahead, not out of malice, but out of necessity. He didn't teach rulers to be paranoid. He taught them to be observant, to be ruthlessly honest about the motives of those around them. I remember thinking, this is too cynical. This is too dark. But then I looked back at my own life, at the friendships that had quietly faded, at the business partnerships that had dissolved with a bitter taste, at the moments where I had felt a faint, unsettling unease, but had dismissed it as my own overthinking. And in every single case, the signs were there. They were subtle. They were quiet. They were masked by smiles and pleasantries. But they were there. The friend who suddenly stopped asking for my opinion. The colleague who would agree with me in public but subtly undermine me in private. The loved one who started making plans that didn't include me, even though we had always been a team. I had seen all of it, but I had chosen to ignore it. I had chosen comfort over clarity. And that's the central challenge. The enemy of foresight isn't ignorance. It's a willful denial. We don't want to believe that someone we care about could be capable of such a thing. We are wired to seek connection, to trust, to form bonds. Machiavelli knew this. He knew that the greatest barrier to a ruler's success wasn't a rival army, but his own heart, his own sentimentality. He wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers." This wasn't a judgment. It was a fact. It was a brutal truth about the human condition. People aren't loyal because they're good. Their loyalty bends to their interest, and when that interest changes, so does their allegiance. You are not safe because they like you. You are only safe if they see no benefit in crossing you. This is the uncomfortable truth we have to embrace. It's not about being a bad person. It's about being a realistic one. It's about building your world on a foundation of reality, not on a wish. And Machiavelli's work gave me that foundation. He provided the framework to understand how people operate, how power shifts, and how betrayal takes root in the shadows. He taught me to look for the cracks in the foundation before the whole building collapses. He taught me that my greatest strength was not my kindness, but my ability to see clearly. And the first thing he taught me to look for, the first quiet signal of an impending storm, was what he called shadow obedience. The first sign is the most subtle, and therefore the most dangerous. It's what Machiavelli called shadow obedience. I saw it play out right in front of me, but I didn't have the vocabulary to name it. I mistook it for something else entirely. I mistook it for respect. In that coffee shop, my friend was agreeing with everything I said, nodding along, his words mirroring mine. It felt good. It felt like we were a team. He wasn't pushing back, wasn't challenging my ideas, wasn't offering an alternative. He was just agreeing. I remember feeling a sense of peace, a kind of relief that we were so aligned. But Machiavelli describes how people in subordinate positions often feign loyalty, especially after being conquered, demoted, or absorbed into your leadership. They obey not because they respect your authority, but because they haven't yet rebuilt their power. And until then, they bow. But he warns, the injury must be done all at once, lest he recover the ability to retaliate. In other words, silence does not mean loyalty. Compliance does not mean agreement. Think about it. In any real, healthy partnership, a friendship, a business, a relationship, there is friction. There's a give and take, a challenge, a debate. We push each other to be better. We offer new ideas. We say, what if we did this instead? That's the sound of genuine alignment. It's the sound of two people with skin in the game, fighting for the best outcome, not just for the quietest one. But when someone stops contributing their own ideas, when they simply become an echo chamber for your thoughts, be careful. That's not a sign of peace. That is a sign of posture. They're holding a position until the time to strike is safe. They're laying low, waiting. This is something Machiavelli learned by observing the courts of Renaissance Italy. He knew that when someone suddenly stops being difficult, it's not because they've changed. It's because they've calculated. When criticism disappears, it usually means loyalty did too. I remember this one time. I was trying to make a big decision about a business venture. I had my friend in the room with me. For years, he had been my most trusted sounding board. He would tear my ideas apart, challenge every assumption, and force me to think harder. It was frustrating sometimes, but it was also incredibly valuable. I knew his critiques came from a place of genuine care for the project. But this time was different. I laid out my entire plan, a risky one, but I was excited about it. I finished, and he just smiled. He said, "I think that's a great idea. You've really thought of everything." He didn't ask a single question. He didn't offer a single alternative. He didn't push back on the riskiest part of the plan. Nothing. Just a simple, almost robotic agreement. I should have felt relieved. Instead, a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that his silence wasn't a sign of support. It was a signal that he had mentally checked out, that he was no longer invested in the success of our vision, but in the success of his own, which now seemed to be separate from mine. Machiavelli explains this using the story of Cesare Borgia's rule. After seizing Romagna, Cesare installed a brutal governor, let him carry out necessary cruelty, and then executed him publicly to gain the loyalty of the people. The key lesson? People fear the cunning more than the violent, and the most cunning will obey you just long enough to replace you. In my world, this shows up as the quiet colleague who always agrees in meetings, but never speaks first. The friend who never critiques your decisions anymore. The partner who suddenly stops offering opinions. These are not signs of peace. These are signs of posture. People holding a position until the time to strike is safe. They're watching, they're learning, they're calculating your next move, and they are staying in the shadows until your back is turned. This behavior is a performance. It's a calculated act to lull you into a false sense of security. You think you're surrounded by allies, but you're actually surrounded by actors, each playing a role in a script you didn't write. The longer you let this continue, the more comfortable they get in your shadow. They are playing for time, waiting for leverage. And every day you accept their silent compliance as loyalty is a day you are giving them more power, more information, more opportunities to strike. The greatest danger isn't the disagreement you have. It's the one you don't. It's the one they are hiding. So, how do you flush out shadow obedience? You test them. You introduce disruption, provoke discomfort, announce a shift in direction, and then you watch. If someone is genuinely aligned with your cause, they'll adapt or question you out of principle. If they're just mirroring you, they'll flinch, they'll panic, their script won't work. And that hesitation, that moment of panic, will tell you everything you need to know. If shadow obedience is the silence of a traitor, the second sign is their noise. It's what Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized: over-communication without clarity. This one is a masterclass in psychological camouflage. They don't disappear. They get closer. They speak often and say nothing. Machiavelli explained how conspirators gain trust, not through silence, but through excessive praise, long-winded alignment, and constant checking in. Their goal isn't to help. It's to observe, to maintain access. Their loyalty is a costume, and the easiest way to spot it is this: they never take risks. I fell for this, hard. I had a colleague, let's call her Sarah. She was a whirlwind of energy, always in my office, always texting, always on a call. You're doing an amazing job. Your vision for this project is incredible. I'm so aligned with everything you're saying. Her words were like a drug. They made me feel seen, appreciated, and powerful. But I started to notice a strange emptiness in our conversations. It was like we were talking in circles. She would praise my ideas, but never add anything to them. She would ask for my opinion, but never give her own. She was saying everything except where she actually stood. She gave no friction, no tension, no visible will of her own. And in my ego, I confused this for support. I confused her proximity for protection. But Machiavelli knew the truth. Proximity increases threat, not reduces it. Because it's not your enemies who betray you. It's the ones who know where you sleep, where your guard is lowest, where your attention is divided. This is why, in The Prince, he advises that rulers keep power dispersed, never letting any one advisor or soldier hold too much favor or familiarity. Because the more they depend on you, the less likely they are to betray. But the moment they become irreplaceable, they begin calculating your weakness. Sarah was becoming irreplaceable to me. She was my constant supporter, my cheerleader. But I was beginning to suspect she was also my observer. Her attention wasn't a sign of loyalty. It was surveillance. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are less careful how they offend one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. For love is preserved by the link of obligation, which owing to the baseness of men is broken whenever it is seen to conflict with self-interest." Translation: people break loyalty the moment it costs them something. And when they're preparing to break it, they'll overcorrect by flooding you with attention. They'll praise your leadership, repeat your ideas, and compliment your strength. But watch closely. They say everything except where they actually stand. They give no friction, no tension, no visible will of their own. That is not support. That is a smokescreen masking delay, people staying close, just long enough to act, when you're not watching. Think about a time you've been truly supported by a friend. They don't just agree with you. They challenge you. They ask the hard questions. They tell you when you're wrong, not because they want to hurt you, but because they want to protect you. Real loyalty makes itself visible through action, through disagreement, through vulnerability. But the betrayer never risks anything. They just orbit, they gather, they wait. I started to notice this with Sarah. When I'd ask her for a specific task or a difficult opinion, she'd stall. She'd change the subject. She'd give a vague, roundabout answer that sounded great, but meant nothing. I would say, "What do you think we should do about this client?" And she would reply, "Well, I think you've already laid out a brilliant path forward, so I'm just here to support whatever you decide." On the surface, it sounded lovely. But underneath, there was no commitment. There was no real contribution. This applies today more than ever. The co-founder who suddenly praises every idea you pitch, but hasn't taken initiative in weeks. The friend who texts you daily but dodges real emotional accountability. The employee who flatters often, but leaves things vague. These are not signs of loyalty. They are signs of distraction. They are the psychological equivalent of a magic trick, keeping your eyes on the flourish while they move the card. And if you don't recognize this, you'll confuse proximity for protection, and you'll become a victim of a very old game. So how do you expose them? You ask for commitment, not in words, but in action. Give them responsibility. Ask for a real contribution. See if they step up or stall. Machiavelli taught that people protect what matters to them. If someone keeps avoiding stakes, it means they have no intention of staying, or worse, they're already committed elsewhere. Here's where it gets truly gut-wrenching. The third sign is harder to spot because it comes disguised as growth. It's misaligned evolution. Machiavelli observed that people don't often betray you out of hatred. They betray you because their direction changed, and you didn't notice. This is the betrayal that doesn't feel like a punch to the gut. It feels like a quiet, agonizing drift. It's the slow, sinking feeling you get when you realize someone you were once aligned with is now building a future that doesn't include you. I've been through this, and the emotional toll is immense. It's not the sudden, shocking act of a traitor. It's the creeping anxiety of an ally becoming a stranger. I had a colleague. We'd started a project together from the ground up. We were a two-person team, working late nights, sharing visions, celebrating every tiny win. I genuinely thought we were building something together. But over the months, something shifted. He started taking on side projects without mentioning them. His language changed. He would talk more about my goals, not our vision. He was referencing ideas and people I didn't know. I'd ask him about his new ventures, and he'd give vague, polite answers. "Oh, just exploring some things," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand. It was subtle. So subtle, in fact, that I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I told myself, he's just growing. He's being ambitious. And that's the most dangerous self-deception of all. Machiavelli explained how political factions, once aligned under a single cause, eventually fracture, not from infighting, but from divergence. When the cause is no longer shared, loyalty decays into competition. The most dangerous betrayal isn't personal, it's structural. Two people once aligned in vision, but now one wants something the other doesn't see. And instead of addressing it, they pretend. They smile. They show up. But behind the scenes, they are building a future that doesn't include you. This is how kingdoms fall. Not from rebellion, but from the quiet realignment of those who once shared your cause. I remember lying awake at night, my mind a swirling storm of fear and confusion. I would replay our conversations, searching for the moment I missed it, the moment the path diverged. The anxiety was a physical weight on my chest. I felt a sense of dread, a chilling premonition that our shared foundation was cracking. He was still showing up to our weekly meetings, still smiling, still giving me that shadow obedience I was now beginning to recognize. But I could see the truth in his eyes. He was no longer looking at our future. He was looking at his. He was an outsider in a room he once helped build. And it wasn't out of hatred. It was out of pure, unadulterated ambition. He was moving on, and he didn't have the decency, or perhaps the courage, to tell me. So ask yourself, who around you is growing in a direction you don't understand? Who's building something separate, but hasn't spoken about it? Who's suddenly ambitious but vague? That's not distance. That's drift. And Machiavelli would say, drift is where betrayal takes root. Power doesn't vanish in a moment. It erodes. The person isn't your ally anymore. They're your competitor, with insider knowledge. This happened repeatedly in Florentine politics. Men who once served under a leader grew influential, built new networks quietly, and then made their move when the old power looked away. The betrayal wasn't sudden. The signs were there, but no one paid attention until it was too late. The emotional climax of this realization is paralyzing. You want to confront them. You want to scream, "What happened to us?" But you can't, because a part of you is still clinging to the old reality, to the memory of what you once were. You hope it's not what it looks like. You hope you're wrong. You hope they'll come back. And that hope, that desperate, illogical hope, is what makes you a sitting duck. It's what stops you from taking action. It's what allows the wound to fester. Machiavelli had no patience for this softness. He believed in proactive disloyalty detection. He wanted leaders to be constantly testing, observing, unsettling, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because power is not protected by love. It is protected by predictive judgment. You have to be ruthless enough to look, to see the signs for what they are, even if they shatter your comfort zone. Once you've spotted the signs, shadow obedience, overcommunication, and misaligned evolution, most people freeze. They wait for the betrayal to become obvious, for the backstabbing, the stolen opportunity, the moment someone finally crosses the line. Why? Because betrayal feels personal. And when something feels personal, we hesitate, we hope, we remember better times, we wait for confirmation. But Machiavelli wasn't emotional, he was surgical. He wrote, "Men must be either caressed or annihilated." What he meant was that halfway loyalty is a liability. There is no maybe in allegiance. If someone around you is hesitating, posturing, or drifting, and you let it continue, you are giving betrayal the space it needs to take root. You are giving the knife the space it needs to leave their pocket. The internal battle I fought was agonizing. The man I thought was my friend was clearly on a different path. I had a choice to make. I could confront him emotionally, get angry, demand answers. That's what my heart wanted to do. It wanted a dramatic scene, a fight, a clear end. But my mind, now armed with Machiavellian principles, told me that was a weakness they could exploit. A confrontation would reveal my hand. It would show them I was onto them, and a smart trader would simply adjust their strategy, not apologize or change course. It would give them a chance to play the victim, to make me look like the bad guy. So, I made the decision to act, not in anger, not in panic, but in silence. Machiavelli's solution was twofold: detect shifting interests early, and make defection more painful than loyalty. The goal isn't to punish the betrayal after it happens. The goal is to prevent it from becoming possible. You simply restructure the room so that they no longer hold position. I didn't need to eliminate my friend. I just needed to isolate the threat from the seat of influence. I had to create a world where, if he was loyal, he would earn more, but if he defected, he would lose everything. Not because I was punishing him, but because I was designing a system that made betrayal illogical. I began to implement what Machiavelli called architectural control. Power in his mind was not about intimidation. It was about designing human behavior through structure. I started by subtly shifting responsibilities. I introduced friction. I tightened control over key information. I didn't explain myself. I didn't accuse him. I simply changed the game. I took him off the core project and put him on a less critical, more contained one. I limited his access to decisions, slowly and methodically. I started working with new trusted players, bringing them into the inner circle I once shared with him. I watched how he reacted. Did he push back constructively, or did he withdraw further? He withdrew. He got defensive. He started making excuses for why he couldn't contribute. His words became even more vague, his praise even more excessive. This confirmed everything I suspected. Machiavelli saw this in military structure. He wrote about how successful rulers never allowed any single general or advisor to become so powerful that their betrayal would matter. He admired Ferdinand of Aragon for constantly rotating his alliances, keeping every power center guessing, never letting one faction grow too confident. It wasn't paranoia. It was architectural control. It was about designing a system where your position is protected by structure, not by sentiment. So, I kept moving. I split his responsibilities and decentralized his control. I didn't let him grow unchecked. I didn't let him operate in the shadows. I exposed him, not to shame him, but to strip his power to strike. The decision was painful, but it was also liberating. I was no longer a victim waiting for a backstab. I was a strategist, and I was making a move. I was taking control of the narrative. I wasn't fighting a person. I was fighting a behavior. I was demonstrating with my actions, not my words, that half-hearted loyalty has no place in my world. The moment you make betrayal a financial, social, or personal downgrade, it loses all its appeal. Machiavelli's core principle here is this: you must build your power so that betrayal becomes irrelevant. Not because it won't happen, but because it won't work. The most powerful act isn't striking the traitor after they betray. It's recognizing the betrayal before they know you've seen it and making sure the knife never leaves their pocket. I was 2 weeks into my silent restructuring when the phone call came. It was late. I was expecting an emotional outburst, a dramatic confrontation, a plea for answers. What I got instead was a chilling twist I never saw coming. It was a call from a mutual friend, someone who had nothing to gain by telling me the truth. "Did you hear about what's going on?" he asked, his voice low with a hint of confusion. He proceeded to tell me that my supposedly loyal friend had been meeting with a direct competitor of mine for months. He had been quietly building a relationship with them, sharing information, and positioning himself for a new role. He wasn't just drifting. He was already gone. And the final brutal piece of the puzzle was this: he had been telling people that I was losing my touch, that my project was a sinking ship, and that he was just looking out for himself. This was the moment Machiavelli's words truly crystallized. This was loyalty without roots. And it was the fourth bonus sign that few ever catch. I had seen the misaligned evolution, but I hadn't understood the fundamental reason behind it. My friend hadn't changed. This was who he always was. Machiavelli once wrote, "A wise prince ought to be cautious in accepting the services of those who have shown themselves bold in offending others, for the same boldness may be used against himself." In modern terms, if someone betrayed someone else to join you, they'll eventually betray you to join someone stronger. My friend had arrived at my side after a bitter feud with a former partner. He had framed it as a fresh start, a search for real values. I had believed him. I had trusted his story. But Machiavelli would tell you, beware the soldier who abandoned his last commander, not because he was wronged, but because he is comfortable with shifting alliances. He may be loyal now, but only because you're currently winning. The moment your grip slips, he's gone. This wasn't about me. It wasn't my fault. It was a revelation about him. He was a mercenary. Your modern mercenaries don't wear armor. They wear smiles. They speak your language. They play your game until your value drops. Then they switch. The real lesson here, one Machiavelli made very clear, is that loyalty is not about closeness. It's about cost. If someone has never had to pay anything for standing by you, they haven't proven anything. He who is not willing to suffer for your gain will never suffer to defend your loss. My friend had never paid a cost. He arrived after I had already built the foundation. He never had to bleed for the project. He never had to suffer a single setback for our shared vision. And so, the moment the winds of advantage shifted, he was gone. This realization was both shocking and liberating. It wasn't an emotional betrayal. It was a strategic one. He had been watching, waiting, and when my position looked slightly less secure, he started preparing for my weakness. Machiavelli's ultimate test for betrayal was simple. Does this person still benefit from your strength? Or have they started preparing for your weakness? My friend was doing the latter. He was already gone. Even if he hadn't made the move yet, he had already defected in his mind. And by the time the phone call came, by the time I learned the whole ugly truth, I was already in a position of power, because I had followed Machiavelli's advice. I hadn't reacted impulsively. I had restructured. I had insulated myself. I had already begun to make him irrelevant. Machiavelli's art of preemptive exile is not about a violent removal, but a structural collapse of someone's influence. You don't attack them. You erase the room they once mattered in. By the time I learned he was actively plotting against me, he no longer had the influence to do any real damage. The changes I had quietly implemented had already stripped his access, limited his responsibilities, and rendered his plotting moot. He could talk all he wanted, but he had no leverage, no resources, and no power. The betrayal was like a blade striking iron. It didn't cut. It snapped. This is the ultimate twist. The most dangerous betrayal is not the one you see coming. It's the one you excuse. I had noticed the signals, the vague communication, the misaligned ambition. But I had excused them because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale of our friendship. This is where most people fail. They wait for confirmation. They hope for a different outcome. They cling to sentiment. But by the time I received that phone call, my proactive actions had already changed the game. I had stopped hoping and started acting. I had made loyalty the smartest move they could make. And when they still chose to betray, it was no longer a personal tragedy. It was an impotent strategic blunder. Once a traitor is neutralized, you must erase the past, not from your mind, but from the environment. This is Machiavelli's final, ruthless principle. He wrote, "In taking a state, the conqueror must do all injuries at once." What does this mean? It means once you act against betrayal, you don't hold on to fragments. You don't keep the betrayer's name on your lips. You don't revisit the wound. You don't keep the bridge half burned. You end the chapter entirely because the presence of a known traitor, even in memory, invites mimicry. But the total disappearance of a betrayer signals something far more powerful. Loyalty is required, but betrayal is forgotten. My restructuring was complete. The friend was gone. We never had a final conversation. There was no closure. I simply stopped including him. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I stopped communicating. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was also a sign of my power. He couldn't confront me because I had given him nothing to confront. He couldn't accuse me of anything because I had never accused him. My actions had spoken for me, and by the time he realized he was irrelevant, it was too late. He was left with no one to blame but himself, and no one to rally against me because I had never created a scene. The preemptive purge had worked. I had made sure the knife never left his pocket. This is the bitter truth. Machiavelli never softened. He saw rulers, generals, and citizens fall because they believed loyalty was based on shared morality, on kindness, on decency. But he wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle liars and deceivers, not because they're evil, but because their loyalty bends to their interest." So here's a brutal truth. Someone can be kind to you, laugh with you, cry with you, and still betray you, not out of hatred, but out of calculated preference. You are not safe because they like you. You are only safe if they see no benefit in crossing you. That's why Machiavelli emphasized building structure over sentiment. He didn't trust people. He trusted systems, checks, balances, pressure points. He believed every powerful person should be surrounded by those who depend on them. Not emotionally, but structurally, not with love, but with leverage. This is my final lesson for you. The most dangerous betrayal is the one you excuse. You notice something, a small shift in tone, a sudden withdrawal, a moment of hesitation that wasn't there before, and your instinct tightens. But then, like most people, you suppress it. You rationalize. You say they're just tired, or it's nothing, because acknowledging the truth would mean doing something about it. Machiavelli would call this softness, and softness is what gets rulers destroyed. He had no patience for those who ignored threats for emotional comfort. He believed in proactive disloyalty detection. He wanted leaders to be constantly testing, observing, unsettling, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because power is not protected by love. It is protected by predictive judgment. So ask yourself, what are you currently ignoring? What signal are you downplaying because it's not a big deal? What shift in someone's behavior are you pretending not to see because calling it out would be uncomfortable? That is the point of rupture. That's where betrayal starts. In your silence. You can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to be a strategist. You can choose to hope that people stay loyal, or you can make loyalty the smartest move they can make. And if they still leave, if they still cross you, let them. Because if you follow this correctly, by the time they betray, they'll have nothing left to gain. The story of betrayal is not a tragedy. It's a lesson, and this is the most valuable lesson of all. Power doesn't protect itself. You must protect it, not with love, but with leverage, not with trust, but with structure, not with hope, but with clarity. And when you do, your world becomes your kingdom. Your relationships become your fortress, and the smiles of your allies are no longer a source of fear. They are a sign of a well-built system. The knife never leaves their pocket because they know there is no target. And that, my friend, is how you survive betrayal before it ever strikes. That is the Machiavellian way. Betrayal never arrives with a warning. It comes with a smile. The true danger lies not in malicious enemies, but in the slow, subtle shifts of those you trust. As Machiavelli taught, we often get betrayed not because we are weak, but because we ignore the early warning signs out of sentimentality. This script has dissected 3 crucial behavioral indicators of a potential betrayal. Shadow obedience, where silent compliance masks a calculated waiting game. Over-communication without clarity, a smokescreen of empty praise designed to distract and disarm you. And misaligned evolution, the quiet and painful drift of an ally, building a future that no longer includes you. The most dangerous betrayal of all is the one you excuse. By learning to identify these signs proactively, you can move from a state of emotional vulnerability to one of strategic control. This means making a difficult, and sometimes painful, choice to restructure your relationships and your environment so that betrayal becomes an illogical, impossible move. You don't have to become a villain to protect what you've built. You just have to become a realist. True power is not protected by hope or sentiment, but by structural design and predictive judgment. Remember, the goal is not to punish a traitor after the fact, but to make sure the knife never leaves their pocket. If you want to understand more about how ancient wisdom and timeless philosophies can help you navigate the complex and challenging world we live in, be sure to subscribe to my channel, The Stoic Philosophy, for more videos just like this.
Thank you for watching this video here on the Stoic Philosophy. If you found value in this, I invite you to explore more videos on the channel. There's so much more wisdom to uncover. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.